Okay, so it's noon. I say let's get rocking and rolling so we can get out and enjoy some of the sunshine. So welcome everyone to the backyard compost workshop webinar. My name is Rhonda Mace. Some might know me as Recycle Rhonda. I am the school outreach coordinator for Chittenden Solid Waste District. And here is my partner.
I'm Ethan Hausman, Outreach for Chittenden Solid Waste, and we are really glad to have you joining us today. We have been very pleasantly surprised at the amount of interest, and so we have a theoretical 100 participants tuned in today. So thanks for being one of them. It does mean that we will keep people on mute to avoid audio issues, but we will have the Q&A open. So please use that to submit your questions, your comments. We'll be monitoring that. Also, it will allow us to download those questions after we're done here, along with your emails. So we will get back to everybody. We will make sure your questions get answered. There will also be other opportunities to tune into workshops. And you can always call our hotline, 872-8111, 8:30 to 2:30, Monday through Friday. And we are happy to answer questions about backyard composting as well as other topics. Back to you, Rhonda.
Yeah, so keep in mind, this is the first time that either of us have ever done a webinar. So bear with us. I'm sure there's, and I am definitely not a technological guru. So we have worked hard to hopefully bring you guys a fun-filled workshop. So the layout of this is going to be, the first part is going to be a little presentation just to kind of give you a background of the who, what, when, where, why, composting, for composting. And then we'll take questions and answer your questions or some of them. We're going to try to get to everybody's, but like 100 people registered for this. So the likelihood of us getting to all of them is well, unlikely. So then after that, we'll have 3 or 4 short videos. After each video, then we'll open it up for questions and answers as well after each of the videos. The videos kind of are a supplement to our hands-on backyard composting. So again, bear with us. But we are, well, actually, there's some questions out there. Oh, okay. All right. So we will definitely get to those. Are you looking at those, Ethan?
I am. I'm trying to answer them as we go, but of course we'll try to answer them live as well, because I'm sure other people will have similar questions.
All right, fantastic. I just wanted to make sure, as much as we practice, everything's not perfect, not by far perfect. All right, so we're gonna hop into the show with the first half or first part, and let me get going on that. Excellent. So composting. What is compost? Many of you might think of compost as pile A over here. This one. Sorry, I'm just using this laser pointer for the first time. So when I refer to compost and when Ethan refers to compost, we are going to mean pile B, which is the finished compost. That compost that is ready to go into your garden and feed your plants, okay? Pile A, you will hear us refer to either as food scraps or as organics, and we'll get into that in just a second. Pile C, and this is basically anything that can be composted, all right? Can be turned into pile B. Pile C is soil. When we mix pile C and pile B, it makes that perfect environment for all of the plants to grow big and strong and then feed our bellies, which is great, and provide us oxygen, all of which we need to survive. All right, so organics are anything that comes from a plant animal. So anything that was once alive can be turned into plant food or compost. In the science world, we call it humus. Mother Nature is composting all the time. And so it's happening. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the beautiful green mountains we live in today. All right, why compost? You might be asking yourself. Obviously, you're asking yourself that because there are a lot of people on this webinar And I would say, I think it was 48% of the people that registered for the webinar actually have never composted or don't currently compost at home. So why compost? This pie chart represents all of the trash that we in Chittenden County, I know there are a lot of people outside of Chittenden County, Vermont. There are actually a lot of people from out of state on this webinar, so thanks for joining. That's very exciting. However, we are focused because we are a solid waste district and we manage all of the solid waste, including food scraps, recyclables, batteries, and the trash. We manage it just in our county. That's where our focus is. This is the amount of trash that we sent to the landfill in 2018. And as you can see, 22% of what we sent to the landfill in 2018 actually was food scraps. I think we could do a better job. I think we can keep those food scraps out of the landfill. That equates to about 58 million pounds of food scraps and compostable paper, meaning like paper towels and napkins and things like that, that we sent to the landfill. What's the big deal, you may ask yourself? Well, this is a picture of the landfill. One, we've got one landfill in the state. Well, two, but one that we use regularly in the state. And about 80% or so of all of our trash in Vermont goes to this very one landfill. It is pretty far away. It's about 73 miles from Williston, which is where Ethan and I are today, one way. And so sending a lot of trucks up there is not friendly to the environment nor to the pocket, if you get my drift. What happens when we toss food scraps into the trash and they go to the landfill? A lot of people think that they make compost while they're there. Unfortunately, they don't, because that landfill gets shut down and shut off and compacted and no oxygen gets in there. So it goes what we call anaerobic or without oxygen. This is a picture of carrots that were pulled from a landfill. These carrots are 10 years old, guys, 10 years. They still look like carrots. They're a little black on the outside, but they're still orange on the inside and still have that carrot shape. When they sit in the landfill, they are not making compost. They are, however, decomposing into water, a lot of water, and methane gas. And methane gas is a greenhouse gas that is about anywhere from 20 to 25 times better at keeping in the greenhouse, or stronger greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And landfills are the third top producer of methane in our country. So instead of making stinky trash gas and a whole lot of water, let's go ahead and make compost. Now, I'm a scientist by training, so I have to do my own experiments because I don't necessarily trust other people's data. And so I have put 4 whole carrots in our backyard compost, our demo bin actually here at Green Mountain Compost. And it got cut off, so my apologies. But in about 10 weeks, those carrots had composted down. Surprised me too, and I'm not saying that same thing's gonna happen in your pile. It was very surprising that it took that least amount of time. However, it was a lot faster than I thought. This did occur in July, so it was hot and the good composting time. Some other reasons that I find, aside from it being incredibly fascinating, saving space in that one landfill that we have, we're reducing greenhouse gases, but we also will be recovering resources. And by that, I mean by taking our food scraps, keeping them out of the trash and actually composting them, we can create plant food. The compost itself provides nutrients. Now, plants get their energy from the sun through photosynthesis. However, they get their nutrients and their vitamins from the compost. And so without it, I don't know if you guys have ever had a house plant, and no matter how perfect sunlight you had it in and how much you watered it, it still didn't grow or it died. And it's probably because it ran out of food. So give it some compost, guys. Compost also stabilizes the soil and it increases the water uptake, meaning the water stays where it's supposed to and actually waters your plant instead of washing right through the soil into the bedrock. Disease resistance, this is one of my favorite things about compost, is it provides resistance to diseases and insect attacks. And that could be disease from viruses, from fungus or from bacteria, as well as those insects. Not saying it's going to keep the tomato hornworm off your tomatoes, but it might keep a couple of them off. Reduces nutrient runoff into Lake Champlain, and as some of you may know, we do have quite the algal blooms in the summertime, so the more nutrients we can keep in the soil and actually nourishing our plants, whether that be your grass or your garden or even our great green mountains, let's do that. Keeps the smell down in your trash. And last but not least, come July 1st of this year, it will be in Vermont at least, illegal to throw food scraps into the trash and send them to the landfill. Nobody's coming to arrest you. However, let's do the right thing. And obviously you want to, because you're here with us today. Like I said, one of the cool things that I like about compost is the disease resistance. And this is like a really big study area right now in science and soil science especially. So this slide represents, on this side here, is cucumber, wheat, and peas that were grown in just sand that was injected with a plant-killing mold, the Pythium. On this side over here, we've got those same plant species that were grown in compost that was injected with that same Pythium mold. And you can see the difference in each one of these plant species that grown in compost, they actually survive. They may not be doing well, but they pop up and they germinate at the very least. So, all right, where does compost happen? So there's a couple of different options we have of getting rid of our food scraps, not just composting. So even if you're on this call and afterwards you're like, oh, this composting thing isn't for me, there are other options. So there is this green cone doodad right here. So that is not a composter, that is a digester, meaning you can put anything in there, any food scraps, I should say. So meat, bones, dairy, veg, cooked food, whatever. You can throw in this green cone and it'll dehydrate it, and then a certain community of fungus and bacteria will go in, and basically it washes away into the soil surrounding the green cone, but you will get no product out of it. You could also choose to do have a hauler come and pick up your food scraps if available in your area. Pick up your food scraps at your house and bring them here to Green Mountain Compost. Or if you're out for an adventure, you can always bring your food scraps here to Green Mountain Compost and drop off, and then we will compost them. Or, well, you'll see the compost critters will compost it, but we'll make them happy to do so. If you have a farmer friend or you have a farm that has a lot of chickens, chickens love to eat food scraps. So that's another way to get rid of your food scraps. And today we're going to be learning about the backyard composting. So we'll give you the ins and outs of how that's done. I myself am very fond of my worm friends. All right, that's how I compost. Been doing it for years. I actually compost right in my, they compost right in my kitchen, my worms. And stay tuned. For at a later date, I will be doing a worm composting workshop too. Woo woo. All right, who does the composting? We call them the FBI agents. Each one of these letters, the F, the B, and the I, stand for a certain group of compost players or compost critters. Can you guess which each of those letters stand for? I think I said at least two of them. So the F stands for fungus. B for bacteria, and I for invertebrates. You will hear me refer to them as FBI agents. Sometimes I'll throw their names out there. Sometimes I will just focus on these two groups here, the fungus and the bacteria, and I will call them microbes. Right? Bacteria are the #1 compost player. All right, they are the ones doing most of the work. And what's going to happen at your house, hopefully after today, and what happens here at Green Mountain Compost is that we create spa-like conditions for bacteria and fungus, for these microbes right here, to proliferate, to grow and take those food scraps and leaves and other things and turn them into fabulous food for the plants. This is what your compost pile will look like, or at least a healthy compost pile. Don't be afraid. Nothing in here is gonna jump out and bite you, all right? I'm always telling the kids, dirty hands are happy hands. But a lot of these things you will not see. Obviously, bacteria, a lot of the fungal spores you won't see. Some of these little guys are so tiny, you probably won't see those either. You might see some of these larger ones in your pile, but have no fear. They are all our friends. They are all the reason we human beings exist. Without them, again, we wouldn't have the Green Mountains or oxygen. All right, just like us, these organisms need air, water, and food to survive. So this is critical when you are thinking about composting or when you're going to compost those kitchen food scraps, because they need not just those food scraps, but kind of a combination of them. So for water, you want to make sure that your compost pile in the backyard is 60 to 65% moisture. You're probably saying to yourself, crazy Rhonda, I don't know what 60 to 65% moisture is. Well, it's a little something we call the squeeze test. And in the videos, we'll actually show you what too wet compost or what perfect compost looks like and too dry compost looks like. Basically, you're going to dig down into your pile once it starts actually decomposing. And don't be shy. Don't be afraid. Shouldn't be smelly. And if it is, well, we'll adjust that later. But if it is, then something's off. But dig down in there, grab a big chunk of it, give it a squeeze. If it's Niagara Falls coming out of your hands, meaning the water's just like pouring out, that means it's way too wet. All right. And we'll teach you how you can balance that out. You could actually just add, well, anyway, we'll get into that in a second. If you squeeze it and it falls and crumbles apart, it means it's too dry. I think too dry is probably the number one of the top 2 failures in backyard composting is that people don't think it needs to be wet. Well, it does. What you want is you want to give it a squeeze and you want it to stick together in a nice ball, or just have a few little beads of water dripping out of it. That's fine too. So that's the perfect environment. So those microbes need that moisture to replicate and to move around to the other pieces of food. And when it's too dry, they just kind of go dormant and are like, All right, air. You're gonna manually aerate, or if you have a tumbler system, you'll spin it around in circles and it'll provide air. If you're a lazy composter like me, you can add sticks in as you're building up your pile, and then that provides air pockets as well. But you wanna make sure that they have some air in there, so you wanna give it a fluffle duffle do ya with a pitchfork or something. Now food is where we're gonna concentrate now. Our microbial friends, that fungus and the bacteria especially, invertebrates to a degree, but they're more opportunistic feeders. So they'll and I have more mobility than fungus and bacteria, so they can go get their food elsewhere. But that fungus and that bacteria, the microbes, are going to need green food and brown food. Now, what the heck am I talking about? Well, the brown food, all right, is where they're gonna get all of their energy. So it's carbohydrates, it's carbon-based foods. You'll hear it called brown food, carbon-based, that kind of thing. That can be anywhere from fall leaves to shredded paper to wood chips or shavings to straw. All of those things can be in combination too, used as brown food. The green food is our food scraps, although not always green in color. They are high in nitrogen, which provides the protein so those bacteria and fungi can replicate. Now, the pile is gonna, or those microbes are gonna need 3 times the energy, so 3 times the amount of brown food as they do green food. And what I mean by that is if you fill up a bucket of food scraps, so say you have like a 2-gallon bucket, you're going to put it in your backyard pile. You wanna make sure that you are following that 2-gallon bucket of food scraps with 3 buckets of brown food. Again, it can be any combination of leaves, shredded paper, wood chips, or straw. Cardboard works fine too. So you want to make sure that combination, this is probably the second reason backyard composting systems fail. If you do not provide them enough brown food and you just start throwing on your food scraps, your pile's going to get stinky and slimy, and you're going to be like, oh, that's it. I'm done. This is gross. I don't want to compost. Composting should not be gross. It is fantastic. It is a great process, and it should not be wicked smelly at all. Grass is another green food, whether it's dry or not. It is a nitrogen or a protein. So always consider that too. If you're throwing grass on the pile, make sure you're throwing 3 times the amount in volume on your pile of brown food as well. So 6 steps to composting, and this is what we're going to address in the videos. So the first video that you guys are gonna see is gonna be your bin selection and site selection of those bins. The second video you're gonna see is gonna be what materials do you compost? Again, anything from a plant or an animal can be composted. Backyard composting has a couple of restrictions. Building the pile, meaning how do we make it work so that it actually composts and we're making that spa-like conditions for their microbial friends, and let it compost, kind of letting it sit there and do its business. The third video is going to be how you harvest that compost. We do have a 4th set of videos all about the green cone, which again is not a composter but a digester. And so I'm not sure who on the call is using a digester or how you're composting, but I say, let's jump right in. All right, so did that stop sharing now?
I'm still seeing.
Oh, sorry, there we go. Woohoo, there I am. Okay, so questions, comments, go ahead, give it to me, Ethan. You're on mute.
Yes, so I am.
It's a reoccurring problem.
About pH was a good one. So the question was, how do I monitor my pH? You know, what do I need to be worried about that? And how do I know whether what I'm adding is alkaline or acidic?
Oh, that is a
Take track of that one, Rhonda?
high-tech question there. Yeah, I mean, as long as you're doing the 3-to-1 ratio of brown to green, food tend to really lie on the acidic side once they start breaking down. But if you follow that 3-to-1 ratio of brown food 3s to 1 bucket of food scraps, that pH balance should be fine. I know I've had questions in the past about wood ash. Wood ash is high alkalinity. It's very basic. So when you start adding wood ash to your pile, then you start throwing your pile all off balance with the pH because it raises it. And so then you need to find a balance in that. I think you should be fine. I know that people have questions about pine needles being acidic. They actually are not acidic. So you can compost those too. Or so I've been told by the masters of the compost universe. What other questions do we have?
Let's see. We had questions about using about composting parchment paper or paper towels. Questions about
our
rhubarb
videos will get
leaves.
into what can be composted and what can't, but yeah, definitely I compost parchment paper, not wax paper. All right, some of that wax paper actually has wax and plastic stuff in it, so you don't want to compost the wax paper. But parchment paper, I compost that. I actually compost that with my worms. And definitely paper towels, so long as they don't have cleaning chemicals on them, or blood or bodily fluids of any sort.
Okay. We were asked, so most of the questions are about what's compostable, so we can come back to that.
Okay.
The tomato hornworms you referenced could go in the compost pile.
Oh, they can go in the compost pile. Yes, that's what I do with mine. I have them every single year, and although it has been decreasing, so we're hoping for the best on that one. I would love to ask everybody out there, I'm going to throw out a poll, right? Again, bear with me because this is the first we've done this, but I would love to know what kind of systems you guys have used or are using, how you're keeping food scraps out of the trash, if you are, and if you're not, that's cool. There is no judgments here today. So I'm going to throw out this poll, and I would love for you guys to vote. Ooh, here we go. I'm launching it. Ooh, all right. Can you guys see that? Everybody see that? Okay, cool. Oh, there we go. Oh, the votes are rolling in now. Oh, I love it. This is fun. And thanks, I mean, I know some of you guys are from out of state, but thanks for tuning in on such a beautiful day outside. Appreciate it. All right, give it like 10 more seconds. Oh, hurry, hurry. In the wire, under the wire. All right, here we go. I'm gonna end the poll and hopefully be able to share the results. There we go. Can everybody see that? Ethan, can you see it?
I can. It
Okay,
looks
great.
none right now is the big winner, Rhonda. So we're going to have some new composters coming online.
Excellent. Well, welcome then. This is very exciting. All right, so I'm gonna.
And we do have at least one person who is worm composting, so that's cool.
Ooh,
Like that.
Wrangler. I had to put the worms in there. All right, so I'm gonna stop the share here. And
On the subject of worms, Rhonda, we have a question about what types of worms are best. Do you want to take a crack at that?
Yes, I can briefly touch on that. That's they're red wigglers, and their species is Icenia fetida is the species you want to go for. Other Icenia species work too. They're just a little more finicky and not a really great producer. And I'll tell you, my worms, I mean, they work hard, and they made like 60 pounds of compost, and it's just me at home. I think I composted 70, 80 pounds of food last year in my worm composter, and they made 60 pounds of compost. So they're pretty awesome. And okay, I gotta stop because I'm just gonna get focusing on worms because they get me so excited. All right, any last questions? We're gonna jump into the video series now. So again, the first video is gonna be all about bin selection, different types of bins, and where you should put those in conjunction to your yard and house. Are we ready to roll? All right, let me throw this bad boy up here. Oh, great, we're ready to rock and roll. Here we go. Sit back and enjoy.
So if you've decided that you want to pursue backyard composting, and that's not your only option, there are other ways you can do it, like drop-off composting. But if you're interested in pursuing backyard composting, then you have some decisions to make about how you want to do it. There are 6 steps to that process of backyard composting, starting with choosing your system, choosing a site or siting your container, the materials you add to it, picking the right materials, building your pile, letting it cook down or compost, and then harvesting from it, using it in the garden. So starting with what container or system you want to use. You have a few basic categories as options. One example is our soil saver over there. This is a very basic system. It is just a plastic box. It does not have even a floor in it, in fact. But you can either put it on something like a piece of plywood, or you can just let it rest right on the ground. It is easy to open, but does lock down. So one of its features is that it secures from pests, and it is very affordable. On the downside, you will need to turn the material by hand, so it's a little bit more labor intensive, but durable, simple, functional. If you're interested in getting a little bit more creative, you can build your own composting system. And what we would recommend is a 2 or 3 bin system. And what you see here is an example of a 3 bin system made from pallets. You can also make these from virtually anything, including cinder blocks or hardware cloth, chicken wire type stuff, and stakes. These are obviously harder to secure, but it certainly can be done, as you see here on the bay that we add to. But often the benefit of these is that it's a rotational system, so that you're adding to one bay and you're flipping it into the next bay when it's ready. The next option you would have would be some sort of a tumbler system. And a tumbler system is different than a soil saver in that it is not directly on the ground. so critters from the ground can't get directly into it, but you do not need to turn it by hand. You just need to crank it, and it does the work of adding the air and giving the critters what they need in terms of mixing the material. Finally, you have a system like what we have up here called a green cone, and that is a digester, not a composter. And there are some fundamental differences we'll get into more, but it impacts the kind of materials you can use in it, and it has a lot of implications for siting. So we'll talk about the mostly limitations around under what circumstances in terms of available siting you can use a green cone. And in fact, we might as well jump into that now, since siting is topic number 2 in planning your backyard composting. So, what you need for a green cone is well-draining soil. So it really needs to be sandy or gravelly, and you can create that yourself if you're willing to do the extra work. Otherwise, you just need to have that in the area that you choose to dig your hole for it. It also really needs direct sunlight. It needs to be aided with the heat provided by being in the sun. And so if you only can find a shady spot, that is not going to be a good fit for you, and we'd recommend a composter instead. As far as siting a composter, you are going to want to think about how to secure it. You're going to want to think about proximity and convenience. The closer to be more convenient for you, especially in the winter, if you're going to have to shovel your way out there. But also keep in mind that there will be some extra fly activity around it, so you're not going to want it right up against your house. It also can attract some critters, although if you do it well, that's less of a concern, particularly if you make it inaccessible, like as the Soil Saver does with the clamp down lids. Always good if you can get it some extra solar by putting it in the sun as well. One more oft overlooked consideration when it comes to siting your compost container or even your digester, your green cone, is tree roots. There really is a concentration of nutrients that will be emanating from your composter. And unless your composter is off the ground or you have set on something, tree roots will have access to those nutrients and they will seek them out. They will actually grow into, from the ground, your composter and add root mass, especially if you're not turning it regularly. So we would suggest not siting your compost bins exactly where you see these, next to the woods. Avoid trees and shrubs when siting.
And there you have the first 2 steps. There are some questions. Ethan, you want to take those away?
Yes. Give me one
Please.
here. So we have a lot of questions, Rhonda, about keeping critters out of various kinds. So among the things mentioned, how we keep squirrels, chipmunks out of the bin and burrowing under the bin, dealing with wild animals like bears, fishers, bigger ones, and including person's own dogs who want to get at it. And bears and coyotes, of making it attractive to them. Want to take a crack at those?
You can take a crack at those.
Okay, I'll do that. There are many strategies for dealing with critters. First and foremost, make it less fragrant, that will attract them less. And the way to do that is to make sure that you're keeping plenty of air in there and it's not getting slimy and smelly. So if you are keeping the right ratios and the right moisture level, it is less likely to be smelly and therefore less attractive to pests. That is also part of the reason why the general guidance is not to compost meat or bones or dairy in your backyard compost. It can be done, especially in smaller quantities, and if you're comfortable with that, but those do tend to create more odors and therefore attract more of this skunk type pests, raccoons and so forth. So stick just to veg and browns if you are particularly concerned about that. As far as limiting access, your setup determines a lot of how well protected it is. I would not recommend a 3-bin system if you are really concerned about critters getting in. A soil saver is quite good for that because of the locking lid. And a tumblers are very good for that if you're not worried about something like a bear that can knock it over. Tumblers, because they're not on the ground, are very hard for ground dwelling animals to get into. So The other thing you can do with a soil saver or something is to set it on hardware cloth or plywood or something like that. So there is no opportunity for anything to burrow up from underneath. Hope that covered the range.
Yeah, and Vermont Fish and Wildlife has some great tips on their website too about composting in bear country. So, which probably would apply to coyotes and so on. I remember one time I was composting at my friend's house. I went out to use her composter and I flipped the lid off, and there was a beautiful skunk in there. So I slowly backed up, called all 3 dogs away from the compost bin. But I forgot to put the big rock on the top of the lid. So that was my bad. What are some of the other questions?
Somebody answering right now a question about whether siting your soil saver on plywood would mean that you can put it closer to trees. I think it's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I never tried it. Those tree roots have a way of weaseling their way in there. But I mean, it's not worth the try. Again, as a scientist, I say let's give it all a go. But and we'd love to hear if you do try it and figure out that's a great way to keep tree roots out. So I'd say give it a go and let us know. I'm a poet and I didn't know it.
Do coffee grounds need to be dried or can they go in wet?
Go in wet. It'll add that moisture. I'm telling you, like, I mean, I live in a very windy place. And so my piles, the piles here, I don't live here, but the piles here at Green Mountain Compost that we use, our demo piles, dry out so quickly because it's quite windy here. I really don't think that you're going to fall into adding too much moisture as long as you're following that 3-to-1 ratio of brown to green. So I say throw it in wet.
Nice. A question about brown material. Somebody I've clearly has a little bit of experience composting and has noticed that it's sometimes hard to have enough browns for that 3-to-1 ratio. Can we talk a little bit more about what to do in those situations?
Yeah, so those, so the kooky papers that come in the mailbox, like, not saying that Hometown News is a bad paper, just saying that. It just seems that there's a lot of them. So I just save all of my papers, shred them up. You can use that as brown food as well. Or 7 days, if you're an avid 7 days reader, definitely shred up, or a regular newspaper reader. Paper bags, cardboard, all of that can be considered brown food. Do a leaf drive. Have the kids rake leaves and bring them to your house. Maybe not right now at this time, but they can drop them at the curb or in the driveway or something of that nature. I don't know, straw. Yeah, that's what I got. Oh, sometimes like wood shops will have wood shavings that you can take for free, or maybe even a small fee. I'm not exactly sure, but I know I work with a couple of small schools that get their brown food, some of their brown food at least, from some local mills or wood shops, or even like the school wood shop. See what they do with it. Do you have any suggestions, Ethan?
For browns?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I pizza boxes are always my backup at times. But I stockpile my leaves, so I do usually rely on that. But we help people that are looking for sources of browns, because we've become aware of a few places that generate like wood shavings or sell wood shavings. And wood shavings can be great because they add both the brown carbon and air. They bulk it.
All right, where are we at here with questions? I got this one. I'm wondering the best system for a small family of 3 in regards to kitchen to compost. I thought I had read that adding 2 or opening compost daily isn't advisable. It can affect the heat or something. Should we keep our food scraps in the kitchen and bring out 1 time a week, or more frequently is okay? So step in here, Ethan. So to me, and somebody else had asked a question about single people. I'm a single person and have been for a long time. I find the tumblers are better for small families, or if you don't have a lot of food scraps. And that way you can add to it at all times, all the time. I don't think adding a small amount is a big deal either. I don't think that too much heat is going to escape, because I mean, there's air, there should be air circulating through your pile anyway. Openings, it shouldn't be a closed system. There should be air flowing through it anyway. I really don't think that, and those microbes are the ones creating the heat. As you'll learn in the next video segment, they're the ones that are cranking that heat up. The sun does heat it up depending on where your bin is and like what color your bin is. But those microbes are the ones that are producing that heat. So imagine you just ate like, or chugged like five-hour energy drink thingy-majigs, and you're like, yeah. That's what those microbes are doing. And once they start moving, that pile will start heating up. So I don't think that, I think if you want to do it daily, that's fine. If you want to save it, once a week, that's fine too. I think it's really what works for you, what's convenient for you guys, and, keeping that system going and that habit going and not making it cumbersome. Anything you want to add there, Ethan?
No, I would say that, yeah, that can be more of a challenge. And I agree with your advice about the tumbler. And I think drop off can be an option too then.
I realize that we are talking about backyard composting, but it's worth keeping that in mind too.
Right. All right, anything else in dire needs of answering?
Yeah, how about coffee, green versus brown? And maybe also you can loop that into the question about the acidity as well, because some people say, well, coffee's acidic, so should I not put my coffee grounds in my compost?
Yeah, oh, that is great. Yeah, so coffee grounds are considered green, right? They're high in nitrogen, actually, and they are not acidic because you just take all the acid out. So the coffee itself is acidic, but once you brew it and drink it down, that acid's in your belly now and not no longer in the ground. So you don't have to worry about the acidity level from that. And they are considered a green. I forget the nitrogen levels, but there are resources out there too. You know what? I think what we'll do is we'll make a resource list, Ethan, on the fly. We'll make a resource list that we can make available to you guys too when we post this webinar. Maybe we'll throw it on to the end of the webinar. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, where are we at now?
Moldy food scraps.
Ooh, mold's fine, man. Mold's a compost critter. Throw the mold in there. Woo. So the next time you see moldy bread, don't be like, ew, go like, whoa, composting happening right in front of my eyeballs.
Guidelines for open air composting. I wanted to compost the twigs in our backyard.
Yeah, so the leaves and the twigs in your backyard, I mean, yeah, friends that I lived with, that's how we did, when I lived there, we did our whole garden, like all of our garden trimmings, including leaves and twigs, in a big pile. It will take a long time, but it will happen because Mother Nature, I mean, imagine what happens to all of those leaves out in Mother Nature. It's not like we're like swimming through walls of leaves every year. So it will happen. It's just going to be a little slower than if you added a lot of green. So if you harvest your, if you have a garden and you harvest it, or you mix those leaves and twigs with your grass clippings, that should speed it up. But yeah, throw it in. We had a big pile like at the edge of our yard, and it took 3 years, but now they're getting good compost out of it this year. So it will happen. It just will probably be a little slower. And less likely that you'll have intruders.
Cardboard boxes.
Sure. Shred them up though. So one thing too, I don't think I mentioned it in the video, so my apologies, but we didn't get to it anyway yet. So here we go. The smaller the bits of stuff that you're adding to your compost pile, the faster it's going to compost because you're creating more surface area for those microbes to get into the nooks and crannies and get the job done. So yeah, so I would say cardboard, but shred it down. And if you have kids, fantastic job. They love to destroy stuff. So when I'm making worm bins with the kids, that's their favorite thing in the whole wide world. is to shred up the papers. So get the kids out there. We'll take one more question and then maybe we'll move on to the video.
Yes. Okay. There have been a couple of questions about invasives. One about backyard composting invasives, and I have a bunch of invasive ground cover plants I want to get rid of. When I bring them to Green Mountain Compost, do they have to be in a bag or can I throw them in a box or tarp to transport?
Okay, so lots going on there. I would not in your backyard compost your invasives or weeds with seeds in it, all right? Because your compost pile most likely is not gonna get hot enough to kill off those weed seeds. I mean, if it's like before it goes to seed, that's fine. And definitely, well, not definitely, but probably not hot enough to, if there are invasive seeds within your plants that you're trying to compost, I just wouldn't risk it. You can, but if it hasn't gone to seed, it's not the invasive part, but if it hasn't gone to seed, then you can compost it. As far as the Green Mountain Compost, yeah, you can bring your invasives here. So you can. You're gonna have to check in with the office. Funny thing is, nobody's in the office. So what you're gonna end up doing is coming in, you'll go up to the office, you'll see Kim's number, give her a call. She just needs to let the operators out here know so that they can move that invasives out of the pile right away or move it right from your vehicle to the to compost as soon as possible. So yes, bring your, and it doesn't matter what you bring them in, that's fine. Yeah, I might say it has to be bagged. I say, yeah, just bring them. But check in with the office. Don't just throw them on the leaf pile. Just check in with the office and give Kim a call, and then she will get in touch with the operator so that somebody can come and take those away right away. All right, we're gonna move into the next video set. We're gonna stop in the middle of it just for questions. This is about what can you compost? And then we'll move into how is it done? How do we build the pile? So we will be demonstrating both a homemade 3-bin system and the soil saver itself, because those are the two systems that we have to demonstrate with. So buckle up tight. Here we go. All right, so you've got the kind of compost system you want or digester. We've got our site selection. So the next thing to choose is, or the next thing to address, I should say, is what kind of stuff can you compost? Well, anything that comes from a plant or an animal technically can be composted. Mother Nature is composting all the time. And that compost, the finished compost, is what's going to feed your garden or your lawn or the trees in the woods behind me, right? Compost is, humus is the technical term for compost, right? That's what Mother Nature creates. And we, because we're impatient, like to speed things up, and because typically we tend to be a bit wasteful, we have a lot more things to compost than, say, Mother Nature does. All right, so what kind of things? Food scraps, all right? And we're talking backyard system right now. And so in your backyard system, when you're composting, we recommend that you don't compost meat, bones, and dairy, right? And that's not because they won't compost down. It's just because critters being like raccoons and skunks and even the crows tend to hone in on those smells and visuals. So you don't definitely, you don't really want them in it. I mean, if you don't mind, go ahead. I'll be honest, I have always composted all of my food scraps when I've composted outside. So except for raw meats and fish, I don't do that. But anything cooked, I just throw in there. So that's your choice. All right. When you're in the house, you can collect your food scraps with just about anything. Now, yes, can you get a fancy composter like, or food scrap collector like this one? Sure you can. And it comes with this cool little charcoal filter that kind of keeps the smell down, right? I've had this for probably about 20 years, so this one's gonna stay with me, all right? Because we'll keep using it. But if you're new to the game of food scrap collection, you can use anything out there. And as a matter of fact, we recommend that you do reuse whatever you have in the house, all right? Because as you know, reducing and reusing is a more important step than even recycling, including recycling your food scraps. So here we've got an old ice cream tub. We've got coffee container. Even those little lettuces that you buy in the plastic containers can be used. And all of this fits very nicely right in the fridge, so you can keep those smells down as you're collecting food scraps, all right? Or this giant coffee thing. So again, you can collect in anything. If you want to collect at home and, or collect in your kitchen and then take it to a larger bucket outside, which is what I do in my house, then you can collect in, you know, in anything. So here I've got an old Home Depot bucket that I had sitting around, and that's what I store all of my food scraps in until I am ready to compost them. All right, in a big batch. So, food scraps. So without food scraps, and as we learned earlier, those microbial friends, our bacteria and the fungi, and even the invertebrates, especially outside, so those FBI agents really enjoy a certain recipe. All right, so we're going to keep in mind 3 parts brown food, like leaves, straw, wood chips, sawdust, shredded paper, all of those little newspaper things you get in the mail. Shred those up and throw them in the compost pile. Why not, right? So all of those brown foods, you want 3 times as much brown food as you do your green food, all right? Green food being all of your food scraps, all right? High in nitrogen gives them the proteins they need to replicate. The brown foods, and today we're gonna be demonstrating with leaves, all right? Brown food gives those microbes the energy they need to get the job done, all right? So now we've got our what we would call feedstocks, that's the technical term, but all of the stuff you need to build a healthy, successful, and delicious pile of food scrap, of compost. All right, so okay, so I just wanted to pause it there for the questions. If there are any about what can go into a backyard pile and what can't. There was one about pickup service, and I can't recall what it is now. I think I answered it, but I do want to talk about that. So in your backyard pile, it is, like I said, recommended that you don't do meat, bones, dairy, oily stuff, because it is a little more attractive to the coyotes and bears and skunks. Oh my. But you can't do like the certified compostable plastics. You can do paper. I don't see why not, like paper plates, as long as they're strictly paper plates and not those fancy ones with like with print on them, because they're typically coated with plastic. But if they're the ones that, you know, basically your food falls off of them, throw those in the compost as well. But not the compostable plastic stuff. So the plant-based plastics that are certified compostable industrial sites like Green Mountain Compost, we accept them here, but not in your backyard. It's just going to take a really, really, really long time, if ever, because it really is based on getting the piles really hot, like 160 degrees Fahrenheit, in order for that plastic to really, the plant plastic to really break down. So I would not recommend that. As far as pickup service, if you're in Chittenden County at least, I can't speak outside of our county, and your hauler is picking it up and bringing it to Green Mountain Compost, you can compost anything that came from a plant or an animal, and anything that is certified compostable. I hope that answers. Any other questions?
Yeah, if I can jump in, Rhonda, we have a question about meat and bones and what the right way of managing that stuff is if you're not just put in your backyard pile. So I will point out that we all have different levels of comfort in composting that stuff. So I do compost small amounts of that in my pile, and I do that by being careful that I'm not letting it get smelly, and by embedding it in the center of my pile, not just putting it on the top if I'm putting in something like that. But it's also worth noting that there is an exemption in the law. That stuff can go in the trash after the law goes into effect if you are backyard composting. The legislature recognizes that you're not supposed to be putting that stuff in your backyard system. So if that's the way you're choosing to comply with the law, then you can put that stuff in the trash, and you are abiding by Act 148. The other thing you can do with dairy and meat scraps is drop-off composting. And even if you're not going to be coming, it's not convenient to come to our facilities regularly, you can just put it in a like a gallon Ziploc bag in your freezer is one way to do it. Or you can put it in a 5-gallon bucket under a bunch of coffee grounds, and with well lidded, and bring it to us when it's convenient. So those are ways that you could also divert that material as well, by having it composted at Green Mountain Compost.
And in our state, in Vermont at least, so those that are outside of Chittenden County, so in Vermont at least, wherever you drop trash off at, if like you're doing like fast trash or have a transfer station, they do have food scrap drop off there as well. I think it's the law that they have to offer that, correct?
I'm sorry, I was studying an answer.
Wherever they're collecting trash, they have to collect food scraps too.
True, yes.
All right, so that is a law. So even outside of Chittenden County, that is the outside of Vermont. Sorry, I don't know. I can't help you. All right, anything else? Questions related to what can and cannot be composted?
Yeah, we've got a lot of that, so let's make sure we cover it.
Yeah.
Bread, someone says, I've been told no bread before because the mold it grows specifically can be harmful to the pile. Is that true or not?
I don't think it's true. I feed my worms bread that's moldy too, and they're going strong. So yeah, mold itself is a compost critter. So I would say no.
I think I have heard that there are types of mold that form on bread that can be dangerous to humans if you eat it, but you're not eating it. You're putting it in your compost pile, and it will get composted. So no worries there. Rhonda, maybe you can speak to rhubarb leaves. Somebody had heard that similar question about rhubarb leaves. They had heard that those were a big problem.
I mean, rhubarb leaves are poison if you eat it, but they're going to compost down into those. They're going to break down into teeny tiny molecules that will then be taken up by the plants. So no worries with that. I would not worry about. I compost. I feed those to my worms too, and I haven't killed them. So I grow a lot of rhubarb, and they love the leaves. And it hasn't killed them, and they're kind of like a little sensitive on the skin thing. But no, it's poisonous if we ingest it. I don't know if it's poisonous to other animals either, but not to worms, apparently. So yeah, I say compost it down.
We had a question about paper towel and toilet paper rolls as cardboard.
Paper towel rolls? Sure.
Yep.
Tear them up in little pieces, throw them in there.
But conversely, we'd recommend avoiding things like Target or CVS ads, the glossy flyers.
Oh yeah.
Because they are they probably just have clay coatings, nothing that's too much of a problem, but we don't want to make any assumptions. So unless it's brown cardboard, we'd suggest recycling it instead.
Forgot about that. Yeah. So even with those newspapers that you get in the mail, some of them are shiny inserts. I just put those in the recycle bin. And then the rest of it I shred up. And I just keep like a bin of shredded paper. I just shred it up right away. I mean, I use them in my worm bin, but the same, I mean, I'm still a balance even in my worm bin. It's a 3-to-1 balance, so. Anything else?
Compostable produce bags. I'm answering that now, but you want to answer that live?
Drop off. I would not do that in your backyard. Just again, that heat isn't going to get up there enough probably to start breaking that plant plastic down, but you can't bring them in Green Mountain compost currently. Anything else?
They're coming fast and furious, which is great. Animal feces, compostable. You said anything comes from animals, but I heard no dog poop.
Technically, yes, but don't do it in your backyard. The green cone digester, I hear, is great for that. We haven't tested that out. I did run into a lady that uses her green cone for her cat waste. She uses like pine stuff or whatever, but and I'm waiting to hear back of how that's really going because she just started doing it. So I do hear that the green cone is a great way to take care of pet waste, but do not compost it because of them being meat eaters. And I know my dog gets into got into all sorts of crazy things. And I don't want that in my food. And again, your pile isn't going to get, most backyard piles aren't going to get above 131 degrees Fahrenheit, which is like the cutoff for bad pathogens. So if it gets above 131 for 3 days straight in a row, you can say, oh, okay, there's nothing really bad in here. However, your backyard compost probably is not going to get that hot. So I would keep that out. Same with raw meats and fishes and things like raw stuff. I wouldn't put in my backyard either, if you're going to be adventurous with meat and guns and such. All right, are we good to move on maybe, or?
Yeah, I think let's keep moving. Let's keep
Okay,
going.
so we're just gonna watch the second half of this video and then we'll do more. I think it's like 5 more minutes. So, all right. Oh, I guess it helps if you share the screen, Rhonda. Here we go. We're going to use our backyard 3-bin system here. And we had already turned over our working bay, all right, our working side. This is the side that's going to be cooking down. We'll talk about that in a minute. So how do we build this pile? All right. Again, keeping in mind that 3-to-1 ratio, very important. Also keeping in mind 60 to 65% moisture is really critical, and probably one of the top mistakes I see in backyard composting is that people don't think that they need to water it. Well, like you, those microbes, they need water to survive. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to, so this is, we're working on building it. It's kind of like layering a lasagna, if you will. You'll hear the lasagna method a lot. All right, so I'm going to actually just kind of dig a little ditch in the middle here, all right, like such, with my handy dandy pitchfork, all right. This is Ethan's favorite composting tool, the pitchfork. All right, I've got my bucket of food scraps here. All right, it's about 3/4 full. And I'm just gonna dump all of that right in the middle, right like that. All right, then I'm gonna take my bucket and I'm gonna stuff it with leaves. How many buckets of leaves do I need? 3, because I have about a bucket full of compost. 3. All right, easy as that. Right like that. I'm gonna spread it out a little bit. I'm actually gonna use some leaves to throw around the sides too. I like to kind of insulate it from smells and attracting critters. And critters being, again, the skunks, the raccoons, all of that stuff. So I'm just gonna use what's left in here to kind of insulate around the outside. Now, I tend to be a bit of a lazy composter sometimes, so I like to throw a few sticks and twigs in there. It creates air pockets for these guys to breathe. All right, so I'm just gonna shushle that around the outside a little bit. Give it a little insulation. All right, so now the last thing to do, probably got like a little food scrap stuck in your bucket here. Maybe you have running water out there. We do not here. So you got a bucket of water here. I'm just gonna give this bucket a nice little rinse-a-dinsel-do-ya. And I'm gonna pour that right over the top of my pile. Right like that. And this pile's pretty dry. So I think what I'm gonna do is go ahead and add a bunch of more water, even though it did just rain. And it's gonna rain later on this week. But because this is nice and open, it will dry out pretty quickly, and it's really windy here, so it'll dry out. You wanna keep a check on that, all right? So, we're ready to let that cook, all right, until at least the next time. So we'll continue to build this pile up. So bigger the pile, the hotter it's gonna get in the middle. And as you will see from Amy McVeigh, she can get her piles up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so then this middle pile we turned over, and this is cooking away in here. So this is gonna cure or cook away for maybe probably another year. So if you're looking for compost in like a year, less than a year in your backyard, it may happen. It may, I'm not saying it's not gonna happen, but it's probably not that likely, especially in an open system. And these are pretty large bays. Typically you want 3 by 3 by 3. right? And fill it all the way up and then let it cook down. That will get the heat going, and that'll give that perfect environment for the microbes to start partying and go ahead and kick up that heat a little bit. So this is cooking, and I wanted to show you guys the moisture level. So we talked earlier about the squeeze test. My motto is always dirty hands are happy hands. So dig on in there. So if you dig on into this compost pile, and yes, it did just rain. Woo! Look at that, Mac Daddy. So there is one of those FBI agents, the fantastical earthworm, all right, night crawlers. These are not composting worms, all right, don't confuse them, but they do like the compost pile because they're eating a lot of that broken down soil in there. So Ethan, can you show us what a perfect moisture, or good moisture content in our compost pile looks like?
Sure. We're going to hope that this this compartment here has stuff that's a good example. So digging down beyond the leaf layer, there are more leaves on top to get a good mixture. We are going to give it the squeeze test. So I'm going to, if I can wring water out of it, it is too moist. If it retains its shape, it is just right. Let's give it a shot. Cannot wring any water out of it, but I certainly can make a nice compost ball.
Excellent. Thank you. So the soil saver, much like the homemade 3-bin system that we just learned about, pretty much, I mean, you're going to do the same thing. Only thing is, this thing is nice and locked down, so you just want to twist the locks off. All right. Looks very similar on the inside. And it's a little dry, all right, because the soil saver does not come with these holes drilled. All right, I drilled those because we thought like it would help put rain in there. But you could always just, like, if on a rainy day, just leave the lid cockeyed like that and let the natural rain come in. So you're gonna build the pile up just like you did with the 3-bin system. So that'll give it a little moisture, because remember, you want it to be like squeezed. So if you check this out, like if you dig down a little further, and I get in here and I squeeze my compost, falls right apart, right? Squeeze, falls right apart. That's not what you mean. That is way too, not enough moisture, all right? What you would rather is, maybe if we dig down deeper, it's nicer down the bottom. We'll see. So what you want is, yeah, even that's too dry. The whole pile is too dry. So all we need to do is add a bunch more water. So thankfully, I brought a bunch with me. And so that's how I would be fixing this pile. Probably even a little bit more. I'd probably just be dumping some in there like that. Because if it gets too wet, you can always add more leaves just kind of to level it out. All right, so we're ready to go. Boom, done. Put the lid back on. Snap it back down. Nice and secure. There, you've just created. So that was just a couple of the 2 systems that we have to demonstrate with. I did get a question. What was that one question I just read and I was about ready to answer? Oh, if using a tumbler, what critters do we have to get to put in the compost? You'll see a lot of things online that compost starter, inoculant, da-da-da-da-da. In a single teaspoon of soil just from your backyard contains billions of microbes. I say just get a shovel and throw some soil in your tumbler and get it rolling that way. That's what I always did when I used a tumbler. I would just put, like, every time I put in food, I just give it a little scoop of dirt in there, a little scoop of soil, and everything is in that soil that needs to kickstart. Plus there's microbes on your food scraps too that will help start the compost process. I mean, feel free to buy the certain communities or the dehydrated microbes that are sold online. I just don't think it's a necessary expense. And I think
Rhonda,
yeah.
one of the questions I was hoping to address was about how to deal with more material as it's cooking down and sort of how to stage things. So I just wanted to point out that my solution for that is to actually have 2 containers going. So one is cooking down while I'm adding to one. So whether that's, and some people swear by harvesting, by doing continuous composting in a soil saver, where they just add to the top and then are pulling out the finished compost out of the bottom because there's a slide drawer thing. And I've never found that particularly successful myself because I'm not able to turn it fully, or else I'm mixing in all the new stuff with the old stuff. So I prefer to just have one soil saver that's cooking down that I'm really thoroughly mixing, and then another soil saver that I'm adding my new material to. I think that's even more true of a tumbler because there's no way to avoid mixing in the old stuff with any new stuff in a tumbler. So if you don't want to be pulling newer food scraps out, but want to be able to still add, I would get a second container, whether that's a basic bin or whether that's a second tumbler.
I did have a question about the tumbler and like, how do you do that? So, I mean, my method when I used the tumbler, which I loved, was like fabulous. And if I weren't composting currently with worms, that's where I would be at. But I just kept adding it. And then in the October, I dumped it all out. I'd sift it out, and our last video is going to be about harvesting, and you'll see like we have a homemade sifter. But sift it out and then just throw those chunky monkeys back into the tumbler, and then continue on for the winter time and into the spring. And then that compost that I had harvested in October, I use in the following year's spring gardens. Gives it time to like cure a little bit and maybe break down. But if you're putting food scraps, like if there's still chunks of food scraps in your compost, that's okay, man. Don't worry about it. I wouldn't fret. It's all going to break down. It'll actually provide some extra food in the soil for those microbes that are still in there. All right, so let's before we start dropping off, because I know, like I said, it was going to be an hour, but we're at an hour and 12 minutes at this point. I'm going to jump into the next video, just short and sweet, and it's about harvesting, and then we can answer any questions afterwards. And then you guys go out and enjoy the sunshine. All right, hang on just a sec. Let me get this second video, or last video, up and rolling. All right, here we go. Hold on. Dun, dun, dun. Now that you've let your pile cook down, and again, it might take like a year or so, maybe 2 years, depending on how hands-on you are, or how happy your microbes are. So now it is time to harvest. So we actually sieve out our compost so that we can throw the chunky monkeys back in to continue composting, or the leaves that are covering up the pile. Now this pile hasn't been cooking very long, so we're probably gonna have a lot of chunky monkeys in there and definitely a lot of leaves. So don't base it upon this. This is just kind of a new pile. So I think this is started in probably like October of last year. So obviously not composting much over the winter. So we have made a sieve out of old 2x4s and some hardware cloth. You can do it however you want. This is the time to engineer, guys. All right, get on those engineer hats. So we're just gonna dig down in here, and we're just gonna throw it on here. Now it did just rain, so this is like really wet stuff too, but and as Ethan said, sighting it along a tree line is not the wisest thing, and that's just because I just dug into a bunch of roots as well, because they're just coming up and eating it. So you can just move this all over the place like this. The bits of finished compost will fall into your wheelbarrow, or I use a tarp actually at my own house, because I actually compost with worms, so it's a little different. And all right. And typically you wouldn't do this when it's like saturated and wet like this, but sometimes you just got to take opportunity where opportunity lies with the weather these days. All right, so like I said, this isn't cooking down all that long, but we're gonna we didn't get much out of there. But we did get, that is the finished compost right there. All right, and I can see some things moving around in there. Oh, there's a little spider, so don't be afraid. It's all fine. They're all compost critters, all right? They're all our friends. All right, so this stuff is ready to go on your garden and feed those bean plants, feed those spinach plants, or even your flowers. Now, harvesting from the soil saver is very similar, except you got a little door right here. And again, I don't really know what to expect in here. So you've got a little door and you can just kind of shovel it out from underneath. Oh, look at that. All right. That actually looks pretty darn good. So there's some eggshells in there. Is that going to hurt your garden? Absolutely not. They will break down eventually, all right? So don't worry if there are little pieces of food still left in there uncomposted. You can just turn that right into your soil. It's really not that big of a deal. So that is Harvesting 101. All right, so there you go. That was a surprise with the soil safer. But again, a lot of that material you saw in there is actually tree roots and just growing right up through because there's no bottom on it. Any other questions out there?
Let's.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
We have just.
I'm like reading and not reading it aloud. So also, water left over from boiling lobster, can that be added? I say go for it. The lobster shells themselves technically can be composted, but man, it's gonna take a really, really long time. I mean, it might be a cool thing for like a scavenger hunt 3 years down the road. You know, who can find the lobster claw? But it's probably gonna take a really long time for it. But it will eventually compost, but it's probably one of those foods too that is pretty fragrant and is gonna be like, ooh, somebody's got lobster in their compost pile. That might attract more critters. But you could use the juice because that'll mix in with your leaves. That's what, you know, I use pasta water all the time to water compost and to water my worms. Any other questions out there?
Yes, we just had a good question about the green cone. Someone's saying, hey, this looks like it's pretty easy. Is there any downside? And of course, the answer is yes. There are pros and cons to green cone, and we haven't really jumped into all that stuff. So I don't know whether you want to wrap up sort of the general and then stay on for people who want to talk green cone.
Yeah. So, yeah, the green cone, I mean, sighting is really important. It needs to be in full sun. We learned the hard way because when somebody sighted it here before, it was along a tree line in the early spring, and it seemed like it was full sun until the leaves popped out on the trees, and then it became shade. And it didn't work. So we moved it last year or a year before, and now it's working well. You can throw anything food scrap wise in there. It will not do, you can't use leaves or paper or anything, none of the brown foods, only green foods go into the green cone, and it does not produce a compost product. It literally will dehydrate and then kind of wash away the smaller molecules into the soil. Even the nutrients might be a little different. I haven't dove. I don't know I'm not an English major, but I haven't like looked into the research into like what the products are that are washing into the soil. I do know it's recommended to put near flower beds and not food beds in case you are composting or digesting raw foods, like raw meats especially. Sandy soil is necessary. It needs to be well drained, really well drained. You can, and there are directions in there. You can make soil. You can make it so it's well drained or gravelly, but you're going to have to engineer that. And there are recommendations in the green cone online too, but in the green cone manual to do that. I know I've had a couple of people call from Heinsberg, and I know I lived there for years, very clay soils in Heinsberg. And I'm just like, unless you want to engineer something that is well drained, probably the green cone is probably not the best choice for clay type soils unless you want to put in the work. I mean, it's great engineer if you have high school students, especially that need like a little engineering mind game or mind project, get them on it. That would be awesome. Did that answer questions about the green cone? After that, once you get it all in the ground, it's easy to use. You just flip the lid and dump in your food scraps. One thing that I do notice though is always bring a cloth with you to wipe the green cone down on the lip and the lid, because if you get food splattered on there, because it is really toasty in there and nice and moist, as it's dehydrating the food, the condensation gets on the walls. The flies really like it, and there will be maggots on it. So I find wiping it off really helps to call the maggot herd or get rid of them actually. But that was like the one downfall I see of the green cone, and making sure that you cite it properly. Questions, comments, anybody else? If anybody's interested,
yeah, did you cover keyhole gardening?
Yeah, yeah, oh yes, Anna Marie did say it, and I was like, please do elaborate. I've never heard of keyhole gardens, so thanks for that website. I'm gonna check it out. It sounds, I don't know what it is, so I'm excited to learn something new. See, thought we were gonna teach you guys, and now we're learning new stuff. Rose says, Soil Saver, do I need to add worms? No, they find their way in it. The Soil Saver sits right onto the ground. So even the fungus and the bacteria and all of the invertebrates will find their way up in there. So have no fear. Those night crawlers and maybe even some red wigglers, if they've survived the winter, which is hard, but they may, will find their way in there. So have no fear. They'll smell it out with the little tiny hairs on their bodies. All right, is anybody out there interested in, we will play it because we'll be part of the recorded webinar. However, we're gonna, if you're done asking questions, which is cool, and I know, man, it's nice that people are kind of dropping off like flies, but we are gonna play now the last of our videos, and it's all about the green cone. And you can stay and watch it. I highly recommend it because it might be something that you wanna supplement with your backyard composting. And if not, we've got all of the questions recorded. We will download those. If we've missed any questions, we can get in touch with you guys directly. And we will be making a resource page that we will send out to you. Tomorrow, you guys will all receive an email saying thanks for joining us. It'll also have a link to some extra videos. CSWD staff have been working on making reduce, reuse, and recycle videos. Our first video series is on food scrap recycling. So you can check that out on Recycle Rhonda's new YouTube channel or whatever it's called. And so there's a link in there to that just to see how other systems, how people are actually really using these systems that work here at CSWD. And Amy McVeigh is in there, and she's the one that can get her backyard pile up to 140 some degrees, which I have never been able to accomplish. Not saying she's like, I'm better than her, but I just have never, I have never even got to 100. So, so that would be pretty cool. And then there's a feedback form as well, because again, this is the first time we've done it. And if you guys can give us your feedback, so appreciative. If it was too long, don't feel, you're not gonna hurt our feelings. Well, you might hurt our feelings a little bit, but honesty is the best method here. We wanna make sure that the future webinars that we offer for backyard composting are to the best of our abilities, and you can provide some insight. So I'm gonna show this last green cone video, and then if you have questions about that, we will stay online until they're answered. All right, now let me try to figure out how to do that. All right. Oh, no, that's not what I want. Sorry, bear with me. Still getting used to this. All right, here we go. Boom. Now we'll move on to the green cone. This is not a composter. This is a digester, meaning you aren't going to get a finished product to put in the garden, but we'll take all of your food scraps, including meat, bones, dairy, and oils. It sits in the ground, so you're basically going to put all your food scraps and only your food scraps. No leaves, garden trimmings, or paper towels. Nothing like that. So no browns, only strictly food scraps. So what happens is that the way that it is shaped, the cones do provide some insulation or the air. So the black cone will go on the inside, all right? And the green cone will sit on the outside. And the air gets trapped in between the two cones. It'll heat up, warming the inside of the cone as well as provide insulation to keep the heat in. Last year, I took the temperature of this green cone and it registered about 145 degrees Fahrenheit. So that heat dehydrates all of the food, and then a certain community of microbes come in and eat up the dehydrated food. They won't produce compost because, as you guessed it, they won't have those browns to make the compost. This is an entirely different group of microbes than you would find in your compost piles. What they will do is break that food down into smaller molecules that will then wash away into the surrounding soil. But if you put your green cone near a garden, it is recommended that you put it next to a flower garden, not a food garden, because you could be adding raw meats and this will ensure no harmful bacteria make it to your food garden. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that the soil is sandy or at least well-drained soil. If you don't have well-drained soil, the green cone directions do provide different ways to create a well-drained site, or you can look it up online. Make sure it is sited in the full sun. We had our green cones sited along the tree line originally when there were no leaves on the trees. So it was sunny at the time. But once those leaves popped out, it became very shady and it did not work. So we had to move it over here. So the sun is necessary and well-drained soil is a necessity too. All right, so you'll want to dig a hole in the ground. All right, whoops, don't do that. About 2.5 feet wide and 1.5 feet deep. I started to dig a hole earlier, so I'll continue on digging. The soil is very sandy, so this is a perfect spot for a green cone location. So once you get a bit dug out, you want to make sure that your basket fits. So make sure that happens. And then you can just flip your basket upside down to make sure that the diameter is good. And you want to continue on digging out the hole. So once the hole is dug, you're going to attach the cones to the basket using the provided hardware. Then the whole unit will sit in the ground. It will sit underground, including where the cones and baskets are attached. So many folks ask me if pests try to get into the green cone. I have not experienced that at all, and we have lots of pests hanging around compost. And thus far, no attempts have been witnessed. So once you get it all assembled, you can pop it into the ground, fill it in with soil, and you can begin digesting your food scraps and keeping them out of the landfill. With your green cone, you will be getting the Sandy Dandy Kitchen Food Scrap Collector. All right. Although it comes with it, it's a little weird shaped. I personally prefer to use something a little smaller, round, because it'll fit really nice in that hole. So that's how I roll. This is just an old ice cream container, but this will come with it. You'll get instructions on how to assemble it and use it, as well as some green cone accelerant. All it really is dehydrated microbes, that special community that is used for this kind of digestion, all right, not composting. So a whole different makeup than what you would find in your backyard composting. Okay, so once you have your green cone all set up and ready to use, now I'm going to demonstrate how one does it. It's pretty easy, and again, it is not a composter. It is just going to digest your food away. So you can put anything in here, meat, bones, dairy, oil, anything food related. You don't want to put any like paper towels or leaves or garden trimmings in here. You strictly want to use food, okay, like your food. So you're going to come down and you can see this little latch right here. I'm going to flip that open, and I'm going to give you a little looky-see of what it looks like in here. All right. You can see a lot of mold. Oops, sorry. A lot of mold. All right, which is good. That's a good sign. All right. I am going to just add these food scraps. Now I'm just collecting these food scraps in an old ice cream container. All right. Let's see if I can get this open with one hand. All right. The smaller the opening, the better, because this opening is not very big. And you want to make sure that when you're dumping it in, that it all fits nicely in there. Now, one of the things that I have discovered by using the green cone is that you want to wipe the rim off and the inside of the lid, because in this hot, warm summer, and this thing will kick up heat quickly, all right? And it's pretty toasty in there right now. But you want to wipe the rim off, because flies will get in there and it's nice and moist and they'll lay their eggs and you might come out to some surprises. So I just usually keep a cloth nearby or carry it with me, and then just take it and wipe the inside rim off, and then wipe around the lid as well. All right. Once you add your food, you can take your magic powder here, the green cone accelerant, and just do a sprinkle dinkle do in there. All right. So it's kind of like seasoning it up a little bit. You don't need a whole lot. If you run out of accelerant and you don't want to purchase anymore, I typically use just a handful of soil too. So there will be microbes in the soil around it that will be effective. So you can just do that as well. Close the bad boy back up, and you are finito. And that is how you use the green cone. Somebody came into the office, so I had to stop them. Anyway, so that was the green cone. And that might not be up your alley, and that's fine too. But you might want to combo those. If questions. You so much helpful. Okay, fantastic. All right, you are very welcome, Anna Marie. So that's all. That's like a wrap. We are going to. This has been recording, so we will be posting this on Facebook and. I don't know, maybe our website. That's not my area. But thanks for joining us, and thanks for taking time out of your sunny Wednesday. Hello, something about composting. If you have any questions, either of us can be reached. My emails are mace, M-A-C-E, @cswd.net, and Ethan's eHouseman. EHAUSMAN @cswd.net. So have a great afternoon. Be safe, but please have lots of fun. And remember, dirty hands, happy hands.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Reach out if you have questions.
Hasta luego. If that's actually correct.